Silence is a decision, not the absence of something to say, the presence of something chosen. The specific, deliberate quality of someone who has assessed what the continued talking was costing and who has made the clean, unannounced, entirely internal decision to stop. Not to make a point, not to produce an effect, to stop, because the talking was not producing what talking is supposed to produce. Not understanding, not resolution, not the specific quality of genuine communication that occurs when two people are actually exchanging something real rather than both performing their positions at each other. The talking had become something else, something that was consuming more than it was creating. And you stopped. That stopping is the most powerful thing you have done in this situation. Not the loudest, not the most visible, not the thing that announced itself with the kind of drama that produces immediate, obvious consequences. The quietest, the most internally generated, the most completely yours. I want to begin with what stopping actually required, because stop is a simple word, and what it contained in this situation was not simple. It required tolerating the discomfort of being misunderstood. That is the specific, particular cost of choosing silence in a situation where you have things to say, where your perspective is real and your experience is valid, and the things you could articulate, if you chose to, would be accurate and relevant and worth hearing, and you chose not to articulate them. Not because they were not worth saying, because the saying of them was not producing what saying things produces when communication is actually working. Because the articulation was disappearing into something that could not receive it. Because continuing to offer what was not being received was producing a particular cost in you, a cost of repeated exposure, of repeated vulnerability, of the specific draining quality of offering something genuine into a space that was not meeting it genuinely. The stopping was the recognition of that cost and the recognition that your words, your perspective, your genuine interior experience of the situation deserved a better use than continuing to pour them into a dynamic that was not honoring them. Let me describe what the silence replaced. Because silence in this context did not simply create an absence, it replaced something, it replaced the explaining. The specific, exhausting, often thankless quality of someone who has been working to make themselves understood to someone who has not been fully meeting them in the understanding, who has been producing more and more precise articulations of their experience in the hope that the right combination of words will finally produce the specific, genuine quality of being received. That hope is real. And it is also, in certain dynamics, a form of self deception. Because the obstacle to being understood is not always a failure of articulation. Sometimes it is something else, something on the receiving side, a quality of the listener or the dynamic or the specific particular circumstances of the situation that is not about the quality of what is being expressed. When the explaining is not working, more explaining does not fix the obstacle. Only stopping reveals what the obstacle actually is. And I want to speak to what the silence has done for you not for anyone else, for you specifically, and it has returned you to yourself. The specific quality of someone who has been in the dynamic of a complicated interpersonal situation where significant amounts of their interior energy have been allocated to the ongoing management of communication within that dynamic is often a quality of being slightly off center, of being organized in part around the needs of the situation rather than entirely around their own center. The silence has reduced that organization, has removed or significantly reduced the specific continuous allocation of your attention and your energy to the management of what is being said and how it is being received and what needs to be said next. All of that resource, and it was not a small amount, has returned to you. You may have felt this as a settling, a quality of your own life becoming more present, of your own thoughts having more space, of the things that are genuinely yours, your projects, your relationships, your own interior development, receiving more of what was previously going elsewhere. That is one of the specific, underappreciated gifts of chosen silence, the return of yourself to yourself. That is one of the specific, underappreciated gifts of chosen silence, the return of yourself to yourself. I want to describe what that return actually feels like in practice because it is not always immediately recognizable as a gift when it is happening. It can feel like emptiness at first. The specific, slightly disorienting quality of a space that was previously occupied by the ongoing management of the dynamic suddenly being available, where the constant background running process of what needs to be said next and how is this being received and what does this mean for the situation is no longer running. And the space where it was running is now simply there, empty. That emptiness is often misread as loss, as if the silence has taken something rather than returned something, as if the absence of the occupation means something has been lost rather than something has been freed. But what was occupying that space was not yours. It was the dynamics. The specific, ongoing, requires your continuous participation quality of the management of a complicated exchange is not the same as genuine engagement with your own life. It is something that was consuming the resource of your attention and your energy and your interior space in service of something external. When it stops consuming those things, they return to where they belong, to you, to your actual life, to the things that are genuinely yours and that have been receiving less than their full share while the management was running. I want to speak to something about the nature of powerful silence versus strategic silence, because the distinction matters for understanding what you have actually done. Strategic silence is performed, it is organized around its effect, around what it produces in the other person, around the specific calculated quality of a move that is designed to create a particular result. Strategic silence watches for the result, adjusts when the result is not arriving quickly enough, has an agenda underneath the quiet. What you have done does not feel like that. What you have done has the quality of something that was chosen because it was right for you, because continuing was costing you more than it was worth. because the stopping was the honest response to what the situation was actually producing rather than a performance designed to produce something in someone else. That is the difference between a strategy and an integrity. Strategies can be reversed when they stop producing the intended result. Integrity does not reverse based on external results. It simply is what it is because it is what is true. Your silence is integrity, and integrity has a different quality from strategy. It does not watch for results. It does not need them to maintain itself. Tell me in the comments whether the silence I am describing matches what you have been living. Whether the stopping you did came from the place I described, the recognition that continuing was costing more than it was creating. Whether you have felt the specific returning to yourself quality that the silence has produced. I want to know how this is landing. I want to speak to what silence communicates, not to any particular person in general, about the person who has chosen it. It communicates sufficiency, the specific non performative quality of someone who does not require the continuation of an exchange to maintain their sense of who they are and what they know and what they are worth. Who has enough of their own internal reference points that the absence of external validation or acknowledgement or even simple reception does not destabilize the foundation? Most people, when they stop talking in a complicated dynamic, do so visibly. The stopping has a quality of statement, of I am withdrawing, and I want you to know I am withdrawing. The silence becomes its own form of communication organized around being noticed. The silence you have chosen is quieter than that. It does not announce itself. It simply is. And silence that simply is, without performance, without watching for its own effect, without the specific quality of someone waiting for the silence to produce something, has a different weight than the performed kind. It has the weight of something that is not organized around anyone else. That weight is felt, not always consciously, in the specific background registered quality of something that is present without announcing its presence. That changes the quality of a dynamic without any visible action having produced the change. Let me speak to what this silence is doing for your clarity. Clarity about a situation tends to be obscured by the ongoing management of it. When you are inside a complicated dynamic, actively engaging with it, producing responses and receiving responses, and continuing the exchange, all of that activity makes it difficult to see the dynamic itself. You are too close to it, too inside the management of it, too occupied with the next move to have the perspective that seeing clearly requires. The silence creates distance, not emotional distance necessarily, perspective distance. The specific, useful quality of having stepped back enough that the shape of the thing becomes visible, that what was previously only experienced from the inside can now be observed from something closer to the outside. And what tends to become visible in that perspective is clarifying the patterns that were difficult to see in proximity, the specific qualities of the dynamic that were hard to assess while you were managing your moment to moment participation in it. What was actually happening underneath what was being said. That clarity is yours now, earned through the silence. I want to address something directly about what the silence feels like from the inside. because powerful does not always feel powerful when you are in it. The silence can feel like giving up, like resignation, like the specific, slightly hollow quality of someone who has stopped not because they have found peace, but because they have run out of options. The silence from this position feels less like a choice and more like an exhaustion. If that is where the silence is coming from, this reading is asking you to look at that honestly. Because silence from exhaustion has a different quality from silence from sufficiency. And which one you are in matters for how you navigate what comes next. If the silence comes from exhaustion, it is worth asking what would genuinely restore you, what the situation needs from you in order to be navigable. Whether the exhaustion is about this specific dynamic or about something more fundamental that this dynamic has exposed. If the silence comes from sufficiency from the genuine, internal recognition that what you have to offer deserves a better context than this dynamic has been providing, then it is worth recognizing that for what it is, a form of self respect, the most durable kind. As we close, I want to give you one image. You in the silence, not performing it, not watching it for what it produces, simply in it, in the specific inhabited quality of someone who has made a genuine choice and who is living inside that choice in the ordinary, daily, this is what it actually looks like quality of a decision that has been integrated rather than maintained. Your own life around you, more present than it was before the silence. Your own thoughts having more room. Your own sense of what matters, occupying more of the available space. And underneath all of it, the silence itself, not as an absence, as the presence of something you chose, something that reflects what you know about yourself and what you are worth and what your words and your interior experience deserve. That is what you did when you stopped talking. You chose yourself without announcing it, without performing it, simply by doing it, and doing it quietly and completely is the most powerful version of it available.